Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 265, and I had a conversation with John Fusco. This guy is incredible, gotta say. So prolific, fascinating, interesting, funny, just a nice person all around, grounded. Just really dug his vibe, you know what I'm saying? He is a screenwriter, producer, executive producer, creator, musician, author. I mean, creative just pouring out of him. Movies like Crossroads, Young Guns 2, Thunderheart, The Babe, Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron, Hidalgo, The Forbidden Kingdom, Marco Polo. I mean, come on, The Shack, The Highwaymen, just wow, what an epic list of films. I'm sure if you are a living, breathing human being on the planet, you have seen at the very least one of those films, but likely multiple of those films. He has written, his fiction includes Paradise Salvage, Dog Beach, and Little Monk and the Mantis, A Bug, a Boy, and the Birth of a Kung Fu Legend. John has a new movie coming out called The Wind and the Reckoning that sounds incredible, and he talks about that as well on the show. Lots going on with this guy. So many projects. I don't know when he sleeps, if ever. We chatted about all sorts of stuff. The creative process, his life, our viewpoints on film, and some of his movies. It's so strange, and I said this to him actually in the episode, that it's so wild seeing a movie and, you know, understanding like this movie is great or whatever, and then years later talking to the person that wrote it. It's always so cool for me to have that experience, and it seems to be happening more and more, which is fantastic. It's that thing, it's like the people you surround yourself with, you know, it rises your level. You want to surround yourself with greatness so that you can rise to the occasion. And I feel like being around all these super creative, brilliant minds, you know, it stimulates my brain, and it makes me want to work that much harder and achieve that much more. So it was an exciting conversation for me. And again, a really good human being. And I think even if you're not a creative person or a screenwriter or any of those things, or a musician even, that there's something really deeply connected about this person that I think will be something that everyone responds to. So that being said, the usual stuff, Hey Human Podcast, can be found on Instagram and Facebook. You can find my personal Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Susan Ruthism. Email me, susan@heyhumanpodcast.com. I love to get your emails. Rate and review Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, because it really helps, and it's a great way to support the podcasts that you love. So not just mine. I mean, rate and review all the podcasts you love, because it's really helpful, and it helps push it up through the algorithms that we all play to. The algorithm drums that we all play to. To find out more about me, you can go to susanruth.com, and on there you can sign up on the mailing list. And of course, this podcast has its own website, heyhumanpodcast.com. And on that website, you will find a links page that is an easy breezy way to find tons of information on every guest I've had on the show. A one-stop shop, if you will. So definitely check that out. And there's also a store on that heyhumanpodcast.com website that you can get merch. Another great way to support the podcast is by wearing a t-shirt that says Hey Human on it. You know, I mean, because then somebody goes, hey, Human, where'd you get that shirt? And then you say, oh, I got it from this podcast. You should listen to it. You see how that works? It's very cool. If you're into music, check out Susan Ruth under Spotify and iTunes. I have 4 records. The most recent, All I Ever Wanted Was Everything. Thank you for listening. Be kind to each other. Be well. Take care of each other. And I'm excited for you to hear this. Here we go. Hi.
Hi there.
How's it going?
Good. How are you? I'm John.
Hi, John. I'm Susan. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Susan. I see that we're both surrounded by books.
They're good friends, aren't they?
We sure are, especially these days.
Yeah, right. Where are you right now?
I'm at my home in northern Vermont, up in the mountains.
Oh, nice. I bet it's beautiful this time of year.
Well, this is a tricky time of year. It's like we call it mud season because it's starting to warm up. So you get one day and it's 60 and you're out in your shirt sleeves, and then you get a blizzard. It warms up and melts, and we live down 8 miles of dirt roads, and so it all turns into
mush.
Yeah.
Welcome to Hey Human podcast.
Great to be with you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, our mutual friend, my mentor, John Velasco, connected us. Love John so much.
Yeah, John is, a legend.
He is a legend.
Although you'll never know it, he's so humble and
I know.
Such a wonderful, wonderful man. I mean, when it comes to the music industry, his depth of knowledge and experience, I just love to get him going and hear his stories.
He's got great stories, and I love him dearly. He's a dear friend. He has. I keep telling him he has to write a book, and he says he can't write one until everybody dies.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm sure he's seen it all.
Oh man, he's got stories. Anyway, that's him. We're here for you. I like to start every one of these conversations with discovering where a person came from. So where did you grow up? What were you drawn to the creative path immediately, or is that something you tumbled into as you got older?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was born in a little rural town in Connecticut, which I know can sound like rural in Connecticut can sometimes sound like an oxymoron, but this was back in the days where there were some real kind of back roads areas, and I guess there still are. But I had a wonderful idyllic neighborhood that I grew up in with a lot of woodlands, and I grew up playing with wildlife. I didn't have a pet dog until later years. I always had a raccoon or a fox or something. So, but my first real creative love was filmmaking, and I would say filmmaking / writing. And we had the wonderful medium of 8mm film back then, Super 8, and so my mother used to generously let me borrow the family 8mm camera, and I would write scripts and recruit kids in the neighborhood. I'd hold auditions and I'd make these short little films, and that started at 10 years old. And it was something I knew that I just felt it then. This is what I want to do, and it was a bit of an anomaly in the area that I came from because. I didn't know anyone else who shared that passion or that dream. And most of the adults around me were like, you better get over that real fast because it's not going to happen.
Even your parents? Your parents too, even though they were giving you the camera? And
my mother, the one who gave me the camera, my mom, she was the only one. And she used to tell me, don't worry, we're going to find a way to get you into Mickey Rooney's acting school and stuff like that. And so, but it was like going to Mars, really.
Yeah, I love that you had auditions for the kids in the neighborhood. They must have loved that.
Well, some did. Some still hold it against me. They said that I was a tyrant of a 10-year-old director. I actually had a megaphone, and that I got a hold of. My dad was in the scrap metal, auto salvage business. And so I've come across all kinds of, that's, how I got a little editing bay that, you'd find things in trunks of cars. So, I had megaphones and stuff like that. But yes, it was a really, a wonderfully creative time as a kid. And I had, I had my mom, and I had just one teacher out of the entire middle school experience who, because she read my stuff. And I had a lot of teachers accuse me of plagiarizing because there was such a discrepancy between my writing and my math. And this was back in the days before we got into stuff like learning styles. And so it was just like, he's failing everything else, but then he comes in with this poem, and where did you steal it from,
Do you remember any of your first screenplays from when you were a kid? Do you remember?
In fact, I still have the films.
Oh, you do? Oh, that's fantastic.
Yes, I do. I have to say, I did adaptations of the old Universal classic horror movies. So, I did a Wolfman. I did my take on the Wolfman. And what I did was I dyed cotton balls to the color of my hair, and we did stop motion with the Super 8, and I applied them. So when you look at it now, it's like, it's kind of, jerky and stop motion, but it kind of works. And, and then,
that's fantastic. I love that.
Did the Bride of Frankenstein, and I cast my cousin Scott as the bride. And halfway through the making of the film, he decided he couldn't take being in a dress and playing the bride anymore, and he bailed on me. So we aborted that film. But I did a bunch of those. I did some Hong Kong style actioners. So I was just sort of exploring my movie loves and doing it myself, and it was the most exciting creative thing. And as I said, I had found a 8mm editing bay. It was, a splicer. It was basically, so I was splicing my own films and experimenting with splicing. So years later, when I, through this roundabout way, got in through the back door of NYU Film School, one of my first courses was the wonders of Super 8 filmmaking as an experiment. And I was like, oh boy. Yes. Yeah. It's so much fun to talk about Super 8. There are a lot of people who just like scratch their heads when I say it. And I always say, well, it's what video would be, I know like a lot of filmmakers from my generation did the same thing. Sometimes I'm amazed. It's like, Spielberg's, he's an older generation than I am, but not by a whole lot more. But like talking with him about our childhoods, I'm like, are we like brothers from another mother? Because he was the same.
Yeah.
Had the Super 8 and just loved the smell of film. Loved the editing process. I was hard on those neighborhood actors because I was, would rehearse. I want that performance. I remember this one girl in the neighborhood, and I was she was being pursued by Frankenstein's monster, and she was supposed to run into camera, like with a look of terror. And she ran in and stopped, and she decided to do it was like maybe, she was ahead of her time with selfies, and she decided to do the beauty shot right in close up, So I never let her live that down. I said, I will never cast you today in any of my productions.
That's so funny. It's cool because I imagine that as you're shaping your understanding of the way a script is for the kids, you're learning personalities of humans, because that's so important in writing, right? You can't write characters that are one-dimensional. They have to be all these different things. Mm-hmm. I think for a lot of writers, they get into the trap of the voice sounds like the same person in every character.
Oh yeah. No, it's a great experience because, children, especially like, during that age, 10, 12, there's a real magic, a creative magic going on. And, that's why I love reading stuff by Ray Bradbury,
yes.
Zen in the Art of Creative Writing. And he emphasizes the importance for we grown up writers making a living at it, never lose touch with that childhood wonder and passion. And he describes that rain barrel that's always filling up. And I continue to go back to that rain barrel. And the stuff I do today comes from ideas passions that formed at a really young age.
Yeah. Have you written a script about that, about being a kid and making a film and something happens? And
Yeah.
have you written? You have?
Well, I wrote a novel. My first novel was called Paradise Salvage, and it's about a kid who finds a Super 8 camera in the trunk of a junk car at his father's salvage yard.
I love it.
But he also finds a dead body.
Of course he does.
And so it's actually a multi-generational Italian-American novel. My dad was Italian, and in the state of, or the tri-state area, Italians tended to control the scrap metal industry. And so it put me as a young boy going to work there in contact with some interesting characters, if you know what I mean. And so I would see things in trunks that weren't there. You know, I would when different characters would come up and they're controlling the docks in Bridgeport, you know, and I want those crushed cars delivered at the docks. I'm like, okay, that's a Corleone character. And so I drew on my memories from that time to create a novel, and I wrote it in the style of magic realism. So it's all from the point of view of this 12-year-old kid who wants to be a writer and filmmaker.
That's awesome.
So yes, to answer the question, no, I didn't write a script. I did a novel, and maybe someday it will be a film.
I bet it'd be great. So you're in film school in New York.
Mm-hmm.
I read that you won a couple of big awards. It was apparent to people around you that you were kicking ass. Yeah.
You know, I dropped out of high school at 16, and it was directly related to my frustrations with trying to find an outlet for filmmaking in my dreams and just being told, you know, and then, you know, in high school, it was like, okay, you know, we don't know what to tell you, you know, why don't you go, you know, business administration. There was just like no concept of breaking outside of the box and leaving the community and going off and doing this stuff back then anyway. So I left school and I channeled my creativity into writing song lyrics and music. And that's how I got into music. And so my high school was basically being on the road as a road musician, singer, songwriter, taught myself a few instruments. And those experiences gave me a satchel full of creative material. I was constantly writing when I was on a Southern States tour with a band. So I saw a lot and documented it. And then at one point during that experience, I just hit rock bottom. And you know, I remember having this epiphany on this bus in the middle of South Carolina, one of these like long, you know, endless drives. I'm looking around at these musicians crashed out, and I'm like, is this where I'm headed? Is this really what I'm going to do? And so I sat back and did this kind of meditation and tried to get in touch with my inner core. And like, when were you really the happiest in your life? When did you feel like you knew who you were, what you were meant to do? And it went back to the filmmaking. So I made up my mind in that moment that when this bus gets back up north to play a show, I'm bailing. I'm going to night school. I'm going to get a GED. I'm going to fight my way back in. I'm going off to like UCLA or NYU, and I'm going to go after filmmaking, and I'm going to do it. Even if I have to die, I'm going to do it. And so that was the moment. And yes, so when I got into NYU, based on my writings, because I got a GED, got in, the first thing I wrote was like set down in the South where I'd been traveling, and it was just, and it got a really positive reaction from the instructors and from the students, and it won a national award, and it won a car. Nissan used to sponsor something called the Focus Awards, where first prize was a brand new Nissan. They flew you to LA, and you were wined and dined and all that, and so I thought, wow, my God, you know, my first shot out with my first student screenplay. But I signed with an agent out there. I signed with William Morris Agency. And I thought, okay, this is going to work. It didn't sell, but everyone was interested. We want to see his next. We want to see his next. So I went back to NYU, attending bar nights in the film school, and started my second script. finished that, got the same response. That was called Crossroads, and entered it in the same award, and it won first place again. So I got a second car, and I was able to sell cars to go to school.
Yeah. Oh my God.
But this time, Columbia Pictures bought the script at the award ceremony. And this has been the day where, the spec script sale was a big thing. And so I was able to go back to New York and go to the bar I was working and give my notice. And I went to the chairman at the film school and said, I'm leaving because my movie's going into production. Walter Hill's directing. It's shooting down in the Mississippi Delta where I was hitchhiking 3 years ago. And I'm leaving. And they said, but you've actually accrued so many credits that you're not that far off from your degree. And we want you to represent, So
I bet.
we'll work with you. So they designed all kinds of creative internships with Columbia Pictures and, independent study with Walter Hill. And it wasn't a cheat because going down on the set of that movie was like my best last year of film school, hands-on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I got my degree from Tisch, and I got my first movie made. And I always say it was the Crossroads 1986, not the one with Britney Spears.
Yes.
And it was Ralph Macchio.
Yeah. And Robert Johnson. Yeah.
I just talked to Ralph again after 35 years 2 days ago to congratulate him on Cobra Kai. And
he's killing it. He's killing it.
I love that guy. So
I love it when the good ones makes me so happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, he's such a good man. Always was. And so that was my first movie, and then it was kind of off to the races. And that movie Crossroads literally had its 35-year anniversary last week. So that's how long I've been doing it, and I haven't stopped, and I'm busier than ever.
Yeah, I've seen it's always funny to me how life works, because clearly I've seen, I want to say, nearly every single one of your movies without having any idea, because when you're watching a movie, you don't, at least before I became a writer person, it didn't occur to me like, oh, somebody wrote this. You just go and you watch the thing. So like Thunderheart, I loved that movie. Loved that movie. Young Guns, are you kidding me? Like, these are The Babe. All these movies to me are such a and not just Bowl of Smoke, but even The Forbidden Kingdom, another one. It's like these are these movies that really, they're just a little left of center that to me they stood out. Do you know what I mean? That's a compliment. Yes, it is definitely a compliment. Yes. And it's interesting because, and I just watched the Highwaymen one because I hadn't seen that, and that's on Netflix, everybody, along with probably lots of these movies. It's certainly on Amazon Prime, I'm sure. A lot of these movies, a lot of the older ones, probably. There's places to find them. And I thought Highwaymen was great, and it's subtly. Obviously, it's a bit of an intense subject, as you know, the search for Bonnie and Clyde by these guys, and legendary guys. But there was humor in there, this subtle humor that just sort of bubbled right under. And it was great.
I love, and I think maybe you'll remember it in Thunderheart too, because you could take those two, and they're both kind of, rural Americana thrillers, but there's humor, always bubbling under. And the humor that I respond to is, and it's the only humor I can write, is humor that comes out of duress, that comes out of these situations. And I'm so happy to hear you say left of center, because I had several screenwriting peers back at the beginning of my journey who were so uncompromising artistically, and like so turned off by Hollywood, and just kind of like, oh no, I would never do that. I'm, they're not making films today. I'll tell you that. Look, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that what I always saw was I wanted eyeballs on my stuff. I know that this is the world. This is Hollywood. But I have an independent creative spirit, and it's the kind of stuff I love to do. But I know how to make it accessible without stretching or without being untrue to myself. And just sort of right from the get-go, this is what this movie is. But it's going to be left of center because it comes from the soul, and it's not cookie cutter stuff. But I believe there's a way to. From the time I was making the short films, I still have these notebooks that my mother saved. I would do posters. I did my own one sheets and the log lines, and I was fascinated by that stuff. So I never looked at it as a compromise. It was a dream to make Hollywood films from the time I was 10, and that's what I'm doing today.
There's also something about, if I may be so bold as to tell you what I see, but there's a thing about your characters that I recognize. A lot of movies in Hollywood, the characters are extra. You know what I mean? They're extra. So people are like, oh, I wish I could be that person. Whereas in your film, in your writing, I feel like any person could be like, that's me. That's me. It's a huge difference. Worlds apart. To me, at least.
I think, I've never really lived in LA. I did for a very short time after, that first, when Columbia bought that first movie, and I was on the first plane to LA. Hey, here we go. But very quickly, I looked at it and I said, okay, so, be careful what you wish for. This is what Hollywood is. This is the thing. And I stayed there long enough just to get a sense of it, and knew that it was not healthy for my writing. And I wanted to go back to the real world and write and live with real people. And so the input that I get day to day, are everyday people, and those are the characters I really love. I'm really drawn to exploring. I appreciate that observation.
Yeah.
Well, I'm real excited about the next movie that I have coming out, and we. Believe it, this is so interesting, because here we are I'm talking about, it's go the Hollywood route and do it. But this is my first 100% independent film. And we shot it during lockdown in Hawaii. And it's called The Wind and the Reckoning. And it's a true story set in 1893. About a indigenous Hawaiian cowboy, because in Hawaii, I'm not sure if you've ever been aware of the Paniolo culture. They call them Paniolo. They predate our Western cowboys. They're Hawaiian cowboys, riding barefoot, and they absorbed a lot of Spanish culture. They created their own music style. But there was a legendary Hawaiian Paniolo living out on Kauai during the time of the overthrow of the Queen. And there was a corrupt government persecution of Native Hawaiians. And they used a pandemic to their benefit. And there was leprosy at that time. So they were rounding up Hawaiian lepers and shipping them to Molokai. And this one guy shot and killed the sheriff. And it triggered what would become, at the time, the largest manhunt in American history. And so I wrote it as a real big epic, and we weren't able to get it made because there's, something about, it can be viewed as a difficult subject, but because of the pandemic, the state of Hawaii knew of the script, and they said, why don't you shoot it now during pandemic, because it's all outdoors. and we'll put some money in and help you. And they put a little bit of money in. We're really grateful. We put a little bit of our own money in, but we shot an epic in 17 days for $2 million.
Whoa, really?
Yep.
Well done.
And I just looked at the cut of the movie, and it is killer. I'm so proud of. It's in 75% Native Hawaiian language.
Oh,
it's
wow,
like
cool.
Beautiful to look at, but it's just a gripping story with amazing performances from Jason Scott Lee and Lindsay Watson, and the entire crew were Native Hawaiians. So it was such an amazing experience. But I bring that up because you're talking about those characters who are extra, right? This was a quiet, Hawaiian rancher who rose up to become a superhero. But it's a true story, and it's been a buried story for so long. I mean, when you hear something like that and you say, wait a minute, how come I never heard of that, right? That's the stuff, like when I did Hidalgo, with Viggo Mortensen, finding those remarkable stories that have been swept under a corner of the rug, and they're out there. And that's the exciting thing. And because there is a kind of some prevailing wisdom out there, or a prevailing idea that all the great stories, have been done. So let's do King Kong and Godzilla one more time, right?
Right.
But there are some really profound true stories, and that's I've built my career on that. On either the Highwaymen. Whenever everybody heard I was doing Bonnie and Clyde, they're like, "Are you nuts? That's like the greatest movie ever made with Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway, Arthur Penn. How are you going to top that?" So I have nothing to do with topping that. I'm showing the other side. I'm showing the side of the Texas Ranger, Frank Hamer, that was vilified in that Arthur Penn movie, when in truth, he was a real upstanding lawman who was known for defending African Americans.
Yeah, he was big at he tried to push out the KKK.
He did, yeah, right. And so I wanted to give him his day in the sun. And so that's another. So it's just like, it might not seem obvious. It's like, wait a minute, Bonnie and Clyde, that's been done yet. But what's the other angle on it? What's the other angle of the story? So that's the stuff that excites me.
What I also notice about your films is that you allow real time, you allow space, which I think a lot of times writers and movie makers, it might be in the movie making, not the writing, but they're rushing through everything because they understand that people's patience level is at an all-time low. But you really seem to understand the importance of space and time, which is cool to see.
It's like jazz, right? It's like sometimes it's the notes you don't play and the words you don't say. And
yes,
I mean, like if you look at the Highwaymen, I'm thinking of the scene with Woody Harrelson and his grandson, and it's like during the Dust Bowl era of Texas, and they're sitting inside and they're eating rolls and they're hungry. And I remember like the scene on the page. It's like the wind blows across the dooryard, the screen door slaps shut twice, and a dog barks in the distance. The fork clinks, a knife is set down. End of scene. I love that stuff. I love it's like like the Horton Foote school of screenwriting, and he wrote Tender Mercies with Robert Duvall and Trip to Bountiful. He actually lived directly upstairs from me when I was going to NYU. He lived in a little apartment up above me, and I used to hear his typewriter going, his old-fashioned Royal going at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I wonder why. I wonder if that's why I write every day at 5. But I wanted to meet him so badly that I went to the doorman. I made a deal with the doorman. I brought the doorman some cookies from Little Italy, and I said, when Mr. Foote comes by, would you just give me a signal? And one day he did, and so I held the door for him, Mr. Foote, and I walked about 20 blocks with him, and He became something of a mentor. But his style of writing, if you think of those films, Tender Mercies and Trip to Bountiful, and he did adapted a few Faulkner films. He was all about the understated vibe.
Yeah, it leaves room for the ghosts. I feel like for the
I love that. Yeah, that's right. It's really true. It's true.
Yeah, which I love. A lot of your films, almost all of them, they seem to have they have this historical thing. Many have a Western thing. You seem drawn to the Asian, historical badass, thing. But the shack seems to stand out. What made you drawn to that film to write that?
Well, it's a great question. Great question. When I talked earlier about Ray Bradbury's rain barrel that fills up, that you keep taking that ladle, and those passions are in there. And when you lay it all out, sometimes you find this kind of red thread that runs through. And I feel that there's definitely a thread that runs through the Native American Western motif and the Eastern, the Asian philosophy, right. It lines up with Taoism so much. And then if you look at the
samurai and the cowboy,
the cycle of influence between Kurosawa and Sergio Leone and John Kurosawa. So I've been fascinated by that. And so when I do something, like Forbidden Kingdom, it's a Western, and then my Westerns are, lone swordsman sagas, so there are things that connect, and at the heart of it is a spirituality and a soulfulness. It's really, that access code has always got to be there for me. What happened was with the shack is I was approached, and they're like, this is like, the second best-selling book other than the Bible or whatever. And it was on the New York Times bestseller list for forever. It might still be there. I don't know. And I was like, but it's this Christian book, right? It's like, and they're like, yeah. And I said, why aren't you going to like a faith writer? Because, I vision quest up in the mountains, I fast in the Black Hills, or I'm, in Mongolia with a shaman, and they're like, that's exactly why we want you to do it. Because we feel that there is a spiritual vibe throughout your work. And we want you to try to find a way to make this, to get it out of the box of faith film and make it more accessible. And that intrigued me. That really intrigued me. And when I read the book, and I loved the idea that it violated perceptions of who was God, what did God look like? And God did not, it was not some being up there who looks like Gandalf. They were open to bringing in a Native American. God at one point appearing as a Native American elder, helping this guy on his journey. But at the heart of it, really, it came down to this theme of forgiveness and releasing your hands from around someone's throat so you're not poisoning your own soul. And just the question of how far can something go before you can no longer forgive it? And so there's, scripture in there that addresses this, but it also, you'll find that in Buddhism, and I really, it was a challenge. I wanted to take it on and see if I could do it. And I think that, and back to your point about the red thread that runs through the material, I love mythology, legend, and lore. And in many ways, I viewed that as, because there were some people who came up to me and said, so are you a holy roller or what? I'm like, no, I wanted to explore this mythology, and sure, there's history and truth underneath it, and there is a degree of biblical truth in the stories of Jesus, but No, man, I mean, the movie did really well at the box office, but critics were like, I mean, they took it so literally. They're like, are they insulting my intelligence, trying to tell me that, it's like, no, man, this folklore, you got to roll with it, and get the message, draw out the message. But so, yeah, that will probably always look like an anomalous thing on my credit sheet, but it was a good experience.
Yeah. I read the book. I don't think I saw the movie. Who played the characters in that movie?
Sam Worthington. Sam Worthington was the lead guy. Octavia Spencer.
I did see it. I was like, I feel like I remember a movie with Octavia Spencer. She's really nice. I met her here in Los Angeles.
She was wonderful as Papa. She's
a heck of an actor. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's a heck of an actor.
My buddy Graham Greene, who's a Native American actor, who was nominated for Dances with Wolves, and he was in Thunderheart.
Yes. You have a lot of crossover actors.
Yeah, I really do. I've done 2 with Vigo. I've done 2 with Kiefer Sutherland. It's so funny.
There's also the 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon in there too, because Kevin Costner, was in Dances with Wolves, Woody Harrelson.
Oh yeah,
there's all that too. Yeah, they did so well with that movie, with the Highwaymen, because Woody Harrelson playing a perfect the emotion that Kevin Costner couldn't quite say out loud, that was just so seething beneath him. It was beautifully acted, I thought.
Something crazy about that is that, so it took me 17 years to get that movie made.
Really?
Yep. But right after I had the first draft ready, and that was the case where the first draft took longer than usual, because I took several different approaches to the story before I finally found that it was more like Lonesome Dove than an actioner, that it was really about these 2 guys in a car tracking Bonnie and Clyde for 62 days. And that they were more like characters from Ride the High Country who time had passed by. They had, patrolled the border on horseback with Winchester, and now they were chasing gangsters, and they didn't want to, but these modern gangsters were killing people left and right. But when I finally got that angle down and we got the script out, the producer, Casey Silver, said, "So who do you see as the 2 guys?" And I said, maybe like Newman and Redford coming back together for the trifecta. And he laughed, and then he said, we won't get them, but that's a great place to start. Well, we sent it to Redford and he loved it. And he said, don't send it to Paul, because I want to do this so badly. And Paul, he's at an age right now where it's like, I really don't want to leave Connecticut. Redford got on a plane and took the script to him and kind of read it to him. And the next thing I knew, we had Redford and Newman doing the Highwaymen. And it was the biggest story in Hollywood at that time. And it was like, oh my God, you scored. No one ever thought they'd come back after Butch and Sundance and The Sting and do one together. And it was perfect. So I was doing rehearsals and read-throughs with Newman and Redford.
Wow.
And then Paul got sick. And he did not recover from that. That was, he wouldn't make it. And so and I have to say, Paul was one of the greatest human beings I ever had the privilege to be around. And I was running a nonprofit Native American Horse Conservancy at the time, and I had no support on it, and I was in over my head, and he stepped up and helped me out. Just by hearing me talk about beautiful guy, but we couldn't find the next combo, that would work. So because Redford was all in, but we said, well, Redford and Tommy Lee Jones, Redford and Redford, nope. And it was just sort of like, where do you go from Redford and Newman? So it took 17 years of that script gathering dust on the shelf for Kevin Costner and Woody Harrelson to become the right age. And I am so thrilled because
They were perfect.
If I could go back and push a button and go back, I would still do it. I would still say Woody and Kevin over Redford and Newman.
While I was watching it, I thought it's funny that you bring up all the Butch Cassidy. So I was like, God, they remind me of those two so much. There's just something about it. And so that's funny that you bring that up, because I felt the essence of that in their delivery. Right.
Yeah. You know, if you're going to have two guys stuck together in a 1934 Ford for 2 hours, you got to dig down into that relationship, and they were kind of like a married couple.
Yes,
together for a long time, and
yes.
You know, and you look at those areas to have fun with. You know, time has passed them by. There's now this new thing called the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, and you know they're using old cowboy tracking systems.
The guns of that. You know, suddenly someone's firing 100 rounds in a second or whatever, and that was new for them. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And you know,
there was a line that was it used to be, it used to be you had a talent and you got famous for a talent, but now, you know, to me it was such a reference to modern times of like, you don't have to have talent to be famous anymore.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you just have to kill people. Yeah, because
you just have to kill people. Yeah.
Bonnie was writing poetry and sending it to the paper.
And getting it, and they weren't celebrity. I mean, they were huge celebrities.
They were like the Kardashians with semi-automatics and
that last scene with everybody grabbing at them and wanting to be a part of something, that was surreal to see. But to me, it spoke so much of modern day celebrity.
You know, and John Lee Hancock, who directed it and did a wonderful, wonderful job. He always, when people would ask us when we did screenings, they said, so how much did you exaggerate that scene at the end when they towed the death car through and people are trying to get a clip of Bonnie's hair? And he said, we actually had to play it down. Otherwise you wouldn't believe it. It was like beyond that. And, but then also the ambush of Bonnie and Clyde, we shot it on the exact same road where it happened in the same exact ditch. And
I get these shivers.
Oh yeah. It's, and it was in Louisiana and Bienville Parish, and swampy, and we're shooting in the summer. And I remember the morning we were doing the ambush, I was like walking along that road and looking in, and you want to talk about the ghosts. And I looked down the road and I saw Kevin, and he was dressed in character and he had his gun and he was just standing in the middle of the road, just staring and staring and staring. And so it's tricky with actors because there's times where you leave them in their zone, right? But he was down there so long, I wanted to make sure everything was okay. So I went down. I said, Kevin, he snapped out of a trance. And he said, man, see that corner right there? Hamer was looking. And that morning, he was looking at that corner with the anticipation, just waiting and just knowing they're going to come around that corner. And he heard that engine and he knew they were coming. And I'm just processing what that had to feel like. And so there was, a filmmaker friend told me, they said, I really loved how you did you shoot that at the real spot? And I said, yes. Why do you say that? Did you know? He said, no, I didn't know, but it was such an almost anticlimactic setting for the shoot. You would think, they're going to, Arthur Penn had a field and cornfield, and it was like a Terrence Malick type, he sees that there was just something almost mundane about the site of this road that made me say, like, why would they shoot it here?
Yeah, I really loved that scene as well, because even though Bonnie and Clyde had killed all these people with little regard, there was still this feeling of reverence over that scene. It makes me almost tear up, of like this understanding. Again, it's that fine line of being on right and wrong, and that I could feel it. They played it so perfectly. I could feel this reverence about what they were about to, the gravity of it all. It was not live. It was not like, oh, let's go in and do this thing and we're here. It was none of that was there. It was just so
we've got to stop this thing now. And, you know,
and an understanding that they have to take a life in order to do it. That whole thing was going on to me. I could feel all of that around it.
You know, I think if you asked me to, like, and I never thought of this till just now in this moment as you talk, if you had asked me to, like, of the 16 movies I've done or whatever, you know, to pull one clip from one movie, just to have, you know, to show a piece of writing that you felt you were really pleased with the way that it translated from the page to performance to the screen, would be when Kevin Costner goes into the gas station with Clyde's father. And Clyde's father talks about his little boy growing up and says, you know, the law dogged him and they ran him and he says, you know, all he did was steal a chicken. And he's like, well, you know, maybe that was the you know, the thing that started the criminal life. He said, well, maybe he was hungry, like we were all hungry. And he said, you know, I won't argue with that. And he goes to leave, and Clyde's father stops and says, mister, I don't think you understand what I'm saying. You got to go kill him. You got to go. You got to put an end to what my boys, you got to end this misery for everybody, for him, for what's happening. He's so deep in right now. And there was no way he was going back to prison. There was no way in the world. I mean, you know, he killed a guy in prison. He killed guards.
He killed a guy that was beating him and raping him, I believe, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And so he just, like, there was no way. It was just like and Hamer was a man killer. You know, he was from the old school, from the old days of, you know, he had 17 bullets in him. He had been in over 50 gunfights. So he was like a throwback to like a Wild Bill Hickok, and they pulled him out of mothballs in the 30s, you know, to go take on. And it was because of you know, the Texas Rangers had been disbanded by Kathy Bates at that point, not by Kathy Bates, but Ma Ferguson. and so because of how they did what the FBI, they did in 62 days what the FBI couldn't do in 2 years, they reinstated the Texas Rangers.
That's right. Allowing for that guy with the mustache to have a career. Okay. Walker, Texas Ranger. What's his name?
Well, you mean Chuck Norris?
Yes, there it is.
Chuck Norris. Yeah. Well, you know, and it's also even the Texas Rangers. It's controversial. Law enforcement's all, you know. It was really interesting because the movie came out right before, you know. The
Texas Rangers is what they meant by a well-regulated militia. Honestly.
Yeah. So it was just touchy stuff. But at that point in time, and Bonnie and Clyde, I think it was really important for this movie to show that, number one, you know, give this guy his due, because his family, and I became close with his son, who was in his 90s, Frank Hamer Jr., who opened up the treasure trove of papers, boxes, you know, crime photos from the time, and trusted me after having lived all those years with a resentment toward Hollywood. And he and his mother sued Warner Brothers and won a large settlement out of court for character defamation. And Mrs. Hamer, Gladys, lived off of that the rest of her life. But the kids, the grandkids, the descendants were ashamed to they never talked about who their grandfather was, because they were ashamed of a lie because of the way he was portrayed. And we invited the Hamer family to a private screening for them in Texas. And they were crying.
I bet.
And the young kids felt, and we asked Travis Hamer, who is in his 40s, you know, probably older 30s, later 30s, you know. So we hope that we represented this okay. And he started to talk, and then he just burst into tears, and his kids were like, And he's like, it's for them. He said, my kids don't have to, after this movie, they don't have to be ashamed of being a Hamer. And so, that in itself, but also, to really, to portray Bonnie and Clyde as the killers that they were. And
yeah, I think Hamer in your movie says, at one point talks about the savagery with which Bonnie flips over one of the police officers. And
that's a controversial incident, because there are some who will tell you that didn't happen. She didn't do it. It was actually the person who witnessed it couldn't really see from where they were. And so it was Henry Methvin who did it and all this. But we had some great historians working with us. We had paperwork, and we had stuff that we got behind that. And we knew a lot more about Bonnie. We had police reports from other incidents in which she opened fire with a machine gun on cops. And,
and I think we know now enough about killer couples to know that the women are just as culpable. I mean, I think we just didn't know back then, right? People didn't understand. They didn't understand the pathology of killer couples.
She wanted to be a movie star.
Yeah, she wanted to be famous, right?
So they would purposely leave their camera with these posing with. She would have been the Instagram. Day.
Yeah, that's why I think that line you had in there was so appropriate about being famous.
Yeah.
I'm curious. This is kind of an odd question, but I feel like you will be down with it. Has Hamer visited you to thank you?
Well, Frank Jr., he passed away.
No, I mean Senior. I mean, has he visited you?
Oh,
you said you do
You mean spiritually?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, in some ways, I believe he has. I think that it was unburdening the family name and having fun. I along with spending time with Frank Jr., I worked with 3 different Bonnie and Clyde historians, and I rode the highways with them. And I wanted to go to every single site of every killing and see, how it went down. So I went to these places where Hamer lived and did his thing. And, I think that anytime I work intensely on a historical character, they visit me during the process.
Yeah.
So I would say definitely during the process, I felt the presence, especially once, I really found the working form and I got his voice. But I think I feel him in the presence of his family, in the way that they've gathered around and we've become friends. They invite me to the Hamer summer reunion every year.
I love that.
Barbecue. And, but I'm just so pleased that, it did well for Netflix. It was one of their top 10 most watched original movies, in the top 6 for that year. And it's still out there. And so people are able to discover this, and working with Kevin and Woody was incredible.
So unlike because I know a lot of writers, they sell their scripts and off they go. And then whatever the filmmaker, the director, or the producer does, they do. But sounds like for the most part, you really are hands-on in there.
Yeah. My first movie, Crossroads, I had an experience where, I went to set as the screenwriter, and I experienced that age-old cliche that you hear, that they take your script, they change it, they do what they want, and they want you out of the picture. And then there's the old addendum to it. And what do they pay you? A fortune. And the idea being, come on, we pay you a lot, now go away. And I just, my first movie was semi-autobiographical. I wanted to be there. And, but I got the sense that I wasn't welcomed there. And I made up my mind when I left, anything I write going forward, I'm going to attach myself as a producer, and that I will be on set, I will be involved with casting, and that because of the nature of the stuff I write, when I come along on a project as a producer, what I really am is a historical consultant, a technical advisor. And I always tell writers, make sure if you're doing something historically, make sure you're the best technical advisor, better than the historians you've conferred with, and so that they want you there. And I think, and be a team player. You're not there to look over the director's shoulder. You just, so I experienced that with both Young Guns. I was writer, producer, and the director loved having me there, and he loved having me work with the actors. He's like, okay, Kiefer's driving me nuts with these questions. Would you go talk to him about that? And what happened was the word got around, and I think directors started to realize that it would be to their advantage to have me on set, that I'm backup, that I'm part of a support system. Mm-hmm. And so it got to the point where sometimes I write and produce, other times, like the Highwaymen, I write. I'm not a producer, but the director wanted me there and loved having me there. And I sit with him in Video Village, and I know how it works. I'm not directing it; you're directing, but I will offer up some observations and take them or leave them. Or this is basically what I was intending with this line. I don't think it's landing that way. Would you consider this version? Yeah, let's go get one like that. Then, of course, all of that prepared me to be a showrunner in TV. And the showrunner is when you've been a screenwriter since 1986, being a showrunner is like the perfect writer's revenge. because now you're sitting behind the directors, and you're saying, get another one, okay, and then, or we got it, we're moving on. You're the boss. The writer is finally the boss in those situations, in this new second golden age of TV.
Yeah.
So although the commitment and the intense requirements of the job can almost kill you, it does put you in the driver's seat, and so you can really protect your vision. But even doing that, I still work with the directors like I do in features. It's like, I want you to get your vision there.
What about an animation? Because that's a whole other ball of wax, and you've done a few animated things.
I did one animated.
I thought you did the
Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron.
Yeah, I thought you did another one to that one for some reason. I thought there were two on your IMDb. I must be mistaken.
Nope.
Maybe one with music.
I know that there's a reboot, Spirit reboot or sequel coming out this June that I have nothing to do with.
Somebody may have tagged you in it then by accident. I think there's a couple on there.
I think so, because I actually started getting some. I actually got into a social media firestorm over something, because someone had posted my photo saying, "You want to know why our beloved Spirit was ruined? Look who the writer is, a white guy." And so I had to remind them, hey, I wrote the original Spirit. Right. I fought for Little Creek, being a Native American lead in that. And I have nothing to do with this new one. So,
yeah, you're tagged in it. So you've got to check your IMDb.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that animation's a four-year undertaking. Steven Spielberg and Jeffrey Katzenberg had called me and had offered me, they threw one sentence at me. How would you feel about writing an animated movie about the history of the West from the point of view of the horse?
Love it.
And we're all in. And I said, so what else do you have on it? They said, nothing. You go do what you want to do, and then we'll take a look at it. And they responded to what I did. I actually went crazy and wrote a novella with music in it. And that lit the fuse for Spirit. And I love it because it was one of the last of the real hand-drawn traditional animated films.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
Yep. You know, I know they went and did a TV series for very little children, you know, Spirit Riding Free on Netflix. And I hear, you know, I'll be walking on the bike path and some young mother will say, "We love your Spirit Riding Free." I'm like, the little kid's like, "He made Spirit." I don't want to. Yeah, I didn't. I don't have anything to do with the baby cartoon. I actually, my first draft of Spirit was more like Animal Farm. It was very, very
dystopian.
Yeah. I had buffalo all singing a song I wrote called "Manifest Destiny" just before they're slaughtered.
Oh yeah.
But because I just seized the opportunity and said, "Wow!" But so over 4 years we dialed it down, but it's still a beautiful film. Bryan Adams wrote a great soundtrack. Hans Zimmer, amazing score.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's so exciting. Your work is really lovely, and what a gorgeous life. What a gorgeous life to be able to dig into these histories and these people and tell their stories. And it's lovely. It really is.
It's a blessing. And, you know, and I'm so glad that on that long bus ride through South Carolina, that I did that soul searching moment that turned me back toward my first dream and made me realize you can't listen to people. You can't listen to the naysayers. You know, you've got to, you know, when you're on the beam, you know, when you're off it. And to be able to be making the living that I dreamed of doing and going deep into these worlds. And every one of those worlds becomes a part of who I am. I'm so grateful. And every day I wake up and it's a blessing and it's not lost on me. I just,
yeah. And the fact that you take such care of the people and telling the stories like you were mentioning about in Hawaii or the indigenous peoples, you know, I think that's important. And it's important for writers to hear that it is something that can be done. You don't have to write stereotypes. You don't have to, you know, do what you think the masses want to hear. You can be true to what human beings actually are and create gorgeous, beautiful pieces of work. And that's important to get out there.
I appreciate that so much. And I think we're living in a real exciting time right now because, you know, a lot of the stuff that I did, I was doing because I felt like stories were not being represented that needed to be represented. And the storytellers from certain cultures were not getting the opportunities. And now we're living at a time where they are. And I'm so happy about that. And I'm mentoring several different writers. And, you know, in the Asian culture, Native American, African American, and telling them, you know, you've got the time, you tell these stories now, and I'll help you navigate the system because I know how, and I'll get behind you 100%, but it's your time. Let's get your voice out there and your story. And so I'm as exhilarated as anybody right now about it. And, you know, there's a lot of bumps in the road. Everybody's kind of finding their way and everybody's touchy and it's super sensitive, but it's going to get its sea legs. And the work we're going to see coming up is going to be storytelling like we've never seen before. We're going to go deep into worlds and hear voices that have just been suppressed for too long.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. I agree with you. I agree. Yeah. John, thank you. Tell people how they can find you. And I will put links to all this stuff on Hey Human Podcast to make it easier for the listeners to just go to one place. But how can they find you if they want to?
You can find me on Twitter at John Fusco 12. John Fusco 12 on Twitter. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and I'd love to stay in touch and share what's going on. I'll have a lot to report about this new Hawaiian movie and other stuff coming up. And
yeah, that's exciting. What's the title of that film?
The Wind and the Reckoning.
That's right. The Wind and the Reckoning. Yes. That's exciting.
Stay safe and well. Thank you for having me on.
You too. Thank you. And thank you for listening, everybody. Bye.
Yeah, thank you.
Rate and review Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.